A beautiful woman walks into a room and something changes. It is subtle, almost too quick to name, but everyone feels it. Conversations pause for half a beat. Eyes move toward her and then just as quickly away, as though caught doing something they should not. Some people straighten, some people are cool. There is admiration in the room, certainly, but there is something else beneath it, quieter and less flattering, a current of unease that no one would admit to and everyone can sense. The arrival of great beauty does not simply please a room, it disturbs it. This is one of the strangest contradictions in human culture. We claim to worship beauty. We build entire industries around it, spend fortunes chasing it, praise it in songs and poems and films, treat it as one of the highest things a person can possess. And yet, at the very same time, we fear it, resent it, and punish it. The beautiful woman is admired and suspected in the same instant. She is envied and diminished, desired and distrusted, elevated and undermined, often by the same people, often in the same breath. A society that says it loves beauty behaves again and again as though it is afraid of it. And it is worth being precise about who bears the weight of this contradiction, because it does not fall equally. A handsome man is rarely made to feel that his good looks are a problem, a threat, or a moral failing. But a beautiful woman learns early that her beauty is a complicated inheritance, something that draws attention she did not ask for and suspicion she did not earn. That opens doors and then makes her pay for having walked through them. The fear of beauty, in practice, is overwhelmingly a fear of female beauty, and that specificity is the first clue to what is really going on. We can watch the contradiction play out in the language itself. The same culture that calls beauty a blessing also calls it a temptation. It praises a woman as a vision and warns that she is trouble in the same conversation. It says beauty is only skin deep, and then treats a beautiful woman as though her skin were the most important fact about her. These are not the words of a society at ease with what it admires. They are the words of a society that wants beauty and is unsettled by it, that reaches toward it with one hand while bracing against it with the other. The contradiction is not an accident of speech. It is the fear leaking out around the edges of the praise. Because the fear is not really about beauty as such. No one is frightened by a lovely sunset or an elegant building. The unease that a beautiful woman provokes is not aesthetic. It is about power. A beautiful woman carries, simply by existing, a form of influence that operates on everyone around her, whether they consent to it or not. And that ungoverned, unearned, unpredictable influence is deeply threatening to the way societies prefer to arrange themselves. We do not fear beauty because it is shallow. We fear it because we understand, at some level we rarely say out loud, that it is powerful, and that its power obeys no rules we can enforce. To understand why society fears a beautiful woman, then, is to understand a great deal about power itself, about who is allowed to have it, about how it is supposed to be earned and rationed and controlled, and about what happens when it appears in a form that cannot be earned, rationed, or controlled at all. The fear is not a small or petty thing. It reaches into the foundations of how human beings organize themselves, and the beautiful woman, without ever meaning to, stands at the center of it. Every group of human beings, left alone for long enough, arranges itself into an order. There is a hierarchy, spoken or unspoken, a sense of who ranks where, who defers to whom, whose voice carries, and whose does not. These orders are how societies function. And most of the time, they are remarkably stable, held in place by 1,000 small agreements about status that everyone has learned and almost no one questions. And then a beautiful woman walks in, and the order wobbles. She wobbles it because beauty is a form of status that arrives from outside the system. It was not granted by the hierarchy and cannot be revoked by it. She did not climb to it through the approved ladders of age, wealth, title, or achievement. She simply possesses it. And the moment she enters, attention reorganizes itself around her in ways the existing order did not authorize and cannot control. The person who was the center of the room a moment ago is no longer the center. The careful arrangement of who matters has been rearranged by nothing more than a face, and everyone in the room registers the shift, whether they welcome it or resent it. This is why beauty is so often experienced not as a gift to the room, but as a threat to it. It is a wild card in a game everyone else is playing by the rules. The man who has earned his standing through decades of effort, the woman who has secured her place through careful navigation, the whole assembled hierarchy of hard-won position, all of it can be quietly unsettled by someone who did nothing but appear. There is a particular resentment reserved for power that looks unearned, and beauty always looks unearned, because in a sense, it is the luck of birth wearing the appearance of a personal accomplishment, and that combination provokes something close to outrage in people who have had to work for everything they hold. And the threat is not only to individuals, but to the principle by which the whole order justifies itself. Societies like to believe that status reflects merit, that the people at the top are there because they earned it, that the arrangement is broadly fair. The beautiful woman is a standing refutation of that comforting belief. Her influence is proof that status can be handed out by fate, that the universe distributes power with no regard for justice or effort, that some people are simply given an advantage the rest can never acquire. She is evidence that the system is not fair, and nothing unsettles a hierarchy more than living proof of its own arbitrariness. And a hierarchy will always move to defend itself. When something threatens the established order, the order responds, not usually through open argument, but through the quiet reassertion of control. Through the 1,000 small ways a group closes ranks around the arrangement it prefers. The beautiful woman, having disturbed the order simply by entering it, becomes the target of that response. And the response wears the mask of morality, taste, or common sense, so that it never has to admit it is really the defense of a threatened hierarchy against an intruder it could not keep out. So the fear begins here, in the simple fact that beauty is power that breaks the order status that arrived without permission, influence that answers to no rule. A society can tolerate power that it grants, because what it grants, it can also take away. What it cannot easily tolerate is power it did not grant and cannot control. The beautiful woman holds exactly that kind of power, and she holds it without even trying, which is perhaps the most unsettling thing of all. Her mere presence demonstrates that the careful human machinery of status can be overridden by something as simple and as unfair as a face. For much of history, the fear of the beautiful woman was framed most explicitly as a fear of what she does to men. Beauty was understood as a force that could make powerful men weak, wise men foolish, and disciplined men reckless. The beautiful woman was dangerous because desire was dangerous, and she was treated as the source of the desire rather than merely its object. If a man lost his composure, his judgment, or his self-control in her presence, the fault was assigned not to his lack of discipline, but to her excess of beauty. She had done something to him simply by being lovely, and for that she could be feared and blamed. This framing runs through the oldest stories humanity tells. The beautiful woman appears again and again as the ruin of great men, the temptation that topples kingdoms, the face that starts the war. She is the seductress, the enchantress, the femme fatale, the woman whose beauty is a kind of weapon she wields against the men who cannot resist it. What is striking about all these figures is how they invert responsibility. The man who desires is portrayed as the victim, and the woman who is desired is portrayed as the aggressor. Her beauty is the crime, and his loss of control is the injury she has inflicted. The arrangement is precise, and it is very old. From this fear grew an entire architecture of control, much of it aimed directly at managing, hiding, and regulating female beauty. Across many cultures and centuries, women were covered, veiled, secluded, and instructed in modesty. And the justification was almost always the same, that female beauty was too potent to be left visible, too disruptive, to men to be allowed into public without restraint. The logic is revealing. It is not the desiring man who must be controlled, taught restraint, or held responsible. It is the beautiful woman who must be hidden as though she were carrying something combustible that might set fire to the social order at any moment. Her beauty was treated as a public hazard, and she was made responsible for containing it. History offers a chilling, literal example of how far this logic could run. When a queen of England became inconvenient to a king who had once moved heaven and earth to possess her, one of the accusations assembled against her was that she had used a kind of bewitchment, that her hold over him had been unnatural, a spell rather than a genuine attachment. The desire a man had felt was reinterpreted after the fact as something she had done to him, a manipulation for which she could be tried and executed. It is a stark demonstration of the underlying principle. When a woman's attractiveness becomes a problem, the attraction is redefined as her crime, and the man who felt it is recast as her victim, even when that man holds absolute power and she holds none. Underneath this lies a fear that is rarely stated plainly, the fear that beauty gives women a genuine power over men, and that this particular power cannot be countered by any of the usual means. A man may hold authority, wealth, and physical strength, and still find himself disarmed by desire, still find his judgment bending around a beautiful face. This is intolerable to a certain vision of male control because it is a form of female power that operates precisely where male power is supposed to be strongest. The beautiful woman represents the possibility that a man can be moved, influenced, even ruled through a channel he cannot close. And that possibility has frightened societies into elaborate systems designed to keep her covered and contained. And so the beautiful woman is caught in an impossible position. The desire she provokes is treated as her doing. The loss of control she inspires is treated as her fault. And the solution is always to restrict her rather than to expect discipline of the people responding to her. She is asked to answer for the reactions of others, to shrink and cover and apologize for an effect she did not choose to have. The fear of what beauty does to men has never really been a fear of beauty at all. It has been a refusal to hold men responsible for their own desire transferred onto the women who happen to be its object. But the fear of the beautiful woman is not only a fear that lives between women and men. Some of its sharpest edges appear between women themselves, and this is the part of the story that is least comfortable to examine honestly. The beautiful woman is often policed, resented, and diminished most efficiently, not by men who desire her, but by other women who feel measured against her. And understanding why requires looking at the position women were forced into for most of history. For a very long time, in most societies, a woman's security, status, and survival depended heavily on her desirability, on making a good marriage, on being chosen. When the value the world assigns to women is tied so closely to their attractiveness, beauty stops being a private quality and becomes a competitive resource, a currency in a marketplace where women are pushed into rivalry with one another. In such a world, the beautiful woman is not simply admired by other women. She is a competitor who holds an overwhelming advantage in the one contest they were all told they had to win. The resentment this breeds is not a flaw in individual women. It is the predictable result of a system that made women compete for approval and then handed a few of them an insurmountable head start. This is why the beautiful woman so often finds that her harshest judges are other women, and why the criticism aimed at her takes such specific forms. She is called vain, shallow, manipulative, a woman who trades on her looks, a woman who thinks she is better than everyone else. She is suspected of arrogance. She has not displayed, and cruelty she has not committed, simply because her advantage is visible and provoking. The accusation that she thinks she is better is especially revealing because it is usually not about anything she has said or done. It is about how she makes others feel, and the feeling is then blamed on her, as though her existence were a deliberate insult to everyone less advantaged. It is important to be fair about this because the rivalry between women over beauty was never freely chosen. It was engineered by the conditions women were forced to live under. When a society makes a woman's entire future depend on being selected and makes selection depend heavily on appearance, it manufactures competition as surely as if it had written the rules on a wall. The resentment that beautiful women sometimes face from other women is not evidence of some natural female pettiness, as the culture likes to suggest. It is the residue of a system that pitted women against one another for scarce security and then blamed them for the rivalry it had created. The fear among women is a wound inflicted from outside, not a flaw arising from within. There is a deeper mechanism here as well, the way the beautiful woman functions as a mirror in which others see what they lack. Her presence can make people acutely aware of their own perceived shortcomings, and few things provoke resentment more reliably than being made to feel diminished by comparison. The beautiful woman rarely intends this. She is simply present, being herself. But the discomfort her presence stirs in others gets attributed to her, transformed into a sense that she is doing something to the room, flaunting, showing off, making everyone else feel small. The mirror is blamed for the reflection. The woman is held responsible for insecurities that were never hers. And so beautiful women are frequently subjected to a quiet, constant policing, a pressure to downplay their appearance, to deflect, to make themselves less threatening, to reassure everyone around them that they are not trying to win a competition they never chose to enter. They learn to apologize for their advantage, to minimize it, to perform humility, because the alternative is to be resented as arrogant. This is one of the least discussed costs of beauty, that it can isolate a woman not only from the men who reduce her to it, but from the other women who have been taught to see her as a rival rather than a friend. The fear of the beautiful woman divides women from one another, which is perhaps the most efficient thing it does. When fear becomes strong enough, it stops being a feeling and becomes an action. And societies have found many ways to punish the beautiful and desirable woman for the unease she provokes. The punishment is rarely honest about itself. It almost never announces that it is punishing beauty. Instead, it reframes the beautiful woman as guilty of something else, something that deserves the fear and justifies the control. And then it acts on that reframing with the full force of moral or legal authority. The oldest and most reliable of these reframings is the transformation of beauty into moral danger. The desirable woman becomes the temptress, the corrupter, the one whose attractiveness is evidence of loose morals or evil intent. In this move, her beauty is not merely feared, but criminalized, treated as a sign of a deeper wickedness that the community has a right and a duty to punish. The witch trials that swept across parts of the world drew on exactly this logic, among others, in which a woman's sexuality, independence, or power over the imaginations of those around her could be recast as a pact with darkness. The woman who was too compelling, too independent, too much herself, became a suitable target, and the machinery of righteousness did the rest. A subtler punishment is the relentless reduction of the beautiful woman to her beauty alone. If she is intelligent, her intelligence is doubted or ignored. If she achieves something, the achievement is attributed to her looks rather than her ability. She is denied the possibility of being taken seriously, forever suspected of having been handed whatever she has earned. This is a punishment disguised as a compliment, a way of praising a woman for her appearance, precisely in order to deny her everything else. It confines her to a single dimension and then treats any attempt to step beyond it as a kind of overreach, as though a beautiful woman who insists on also being respected is asking for too much. The 20th century gave this ancient punishment a glamorous new costume in the figure of the femme fatale, the beautiful woman of film and fiction, whose allure leads men to their ruin. She is seductive, intelligent, and independent, and she is almost always destroyed by the end of the story, punished for the very qualities that made her compelling. The pattern is worth noticing because it is so consistent. The culture builds a fantasy of the dangerously attractive woman, invites the audience to desire her, and then insists that she be punished for the desire she was designed to provoke. Her death or downfall is presented as justice, a restoration of order, the necessary consequence of a beauty that refused to stay safely contained. The femme fatale is Helen in modern dress, blamed once again for the fire her face was said to start. There is also the punishment of surveillance and judgment, the way the beautiful woman is watched more closely, held to stricter standards, and criticized more harshly than others. Her behavior is scrutinized for evidence of the vanity or manipulation she is assumed to possess. Her clothing is read as a statement she must answer for. Her mistakes are magnified, her successes discounted. She lives under a level of attention that is itself a form of control, a constant reminder that she is being evaluated and that the evaluation is rarely generous. The intensity of the watching is proportional to the fear, and the beautiful woman is watched a great deal. What unites all of these punishments is that they take a woman who has done nothing wrong and construct a wrongdoing to justify the fear she provokes. She becomes the temptress, the airhead, the manipulator, the woman who is asking for it, not because the evidence supports these characterizations, but because the fear demands them. A society cannot easily admit that it is punishing a woman simply for being beautiful, for that would be to confess how threatened it is by a power it cannot control. So it invents crimes and it punishes the invented crimes, and it tells itself that justice is being done. The beautiful woman pays the price for a fear that was never her responsibility and a power she never asked to hold. Beneath every version of this fear lies a single unifying source, and once it is named, the whole tangled pattern becomes clear. Society fears the beautiful woman because she possesses a form of power that cannot be earned, cannot be regulated, cannot be fairly distributed, and cannot be taken away. Almost every other kind of power can, in principle, be managed. Wealth can be taxed, taken, or lost. Titles can be granted and revoked. Authority can be checked, balanced, and removed. But beauty answers to none of these mechanisms. It arrives by chance, it operates automatically, and it stays until time alone reclaims it. It is power outside the reach of every tool a society has for controlling power. And that is precisely what makes it frightening. Human beings are deeply uncomfortable with power they cannot ration. So much of civilization is an elaborate effort to ensure that influence is distributed according to rules, that advantages are earned and can be justified, that no one holds sway they did not somehow deserve. Beauty violates all of this. It is influence handed out by nature with complete indifference to merit, and it cannot be redistributed to make things fair. There is no way to work harder and acquire it, no way to legislate it into balance, no way to strip it from those who have too much and grant it to those who have none. It sits entirely outside the moral economy of earning, and things outside that economy are always experienced as a kind of affront. There is also a more intimate discomfort at work, one that touches everyone regardless of their place in any hierarchy. The beautiful woman is a reminder of what others lack and, more painfully, of what they are losing. Beauty is bound up with youth, and youth is the one possession every single person is in the process of surrendering. To stand before great beauty is to be confronted, however unconsciously, with one's own ordinariness and one's own mortality, with the passage of time and the fading of one's own bloom. The fear she provokes is partly the fear of the mirror, the discomfort of being shown in the shape of another person, everything the years take away. And that fear, too, is transferred onto her as though she were flaunting something rather than simply possessing it. Consider how differently society treats forms of advantage. that can be moralized as earned. We admire the person who is beautiful through discipline, the athlete, the person who transformed themselves through relentless effort, because that beauty can be told as a story of merit. It is natural, effortless beauty that provokes the sharpest unease, precisely because it cannot be narrated as a reward for anything. The woman who is simply born lovely offers no story of struggle to make her advantage feel deserved. She short-circuits the entire moral logic by which we make peace with the fact that some people have more than others. And an advantage that cannot be made to feel deserved is an advantage that will always be quietly resented, no matter how gracefully its holder carries it. This is why the fear is so persistent and so difficult to reason away. It is not based on anything the beautiful woman does. It is based on what she is and on what her existence reveals about the limits of control, the unfairness of fate, and the impermanence of everything. She is living proof that power can be arbitrary, that advantage can be unearned, that the human machinery of merit and status can be overridden by chance. She is a walking reminder that the world is not fair and that time spares no one. These are among the most uncomfortable truths a person can face, and the beautiful woman embodies all of them at once, which is a great deal to ask of anyone simply for being lovely. When you understand this, the fear stops looking like a judgment on beautiful women and starts looking like a confession about everyone else. To fear a beautiful woman is to admit that beauty is powerful, that power can be unearned, that fairness is a story we tell rather than a law of nature, and that we are all subject to time. The fear is not really about her at all. It is about us, about our discomfort with everything she happens to make visible. She becomes the screen onto which a society projects its deepest anxieties about power, justice, desire, and death, and then punishes her for the projection as though she had authored the very truths she merely reflects. If the fear of the beautiful woman is really a confession of how powerful beauty is, then it follows that the fear is, in its strange way, a form of tribute. Societies do not build elaborate systems of control around things that are weak. They do not veil, police, criminalize, and surveil what does not threaten them. The sheer scale of the machinery assembled to manage female beauty across history is itself the clearest possible evidence of how much power that beauty was understood to hold. You do not fear what cannot move you. The fear is an admission, spoken in the language of control, that beauty was always a genuine force. And this reframing changes what it means to be a beautiful woman in a world that fears beauty. The pressure such a woman faces is, at bottom, a pressure to shrink, to apologize, to make herself smaller and less disruptive so that the fear can subside and the order can feel stable again. She is asked to downplay what she has, to deflect the attention, to reassure everyone that she is not a threat, to carry her advantage as though it were an embarrassment. The entire weight of the fear pushes in one direction, toward her diminishment, toward a beautiful woman who has learned to make herself less in order to be tolerated. The refusal to shrink is therefore its own quiet form of power. The beautiful woman who declines to apologize for her beauty, who neither weaponizes it nor hides it, who simply holds it as one true fact among the many that make up who she is, refuses the entire bargain that the fear tries to impose. She does not accept that her existence is an insult that must be softened, or that her advantage is a crime that must be atoned for, or that she owes the room a performance of humility to earn the right to be present. She lets the fear be the room's problem rather than her own, and in doing so, she reclaims something that the fear was designed to take from her, the simple freedom to occupy her own life without apology. It helps, too, to remember that the fear has always been strongest in the societies least willing to hold people responsible for their own reactions. A culture confident in its own self-command does not need to hide beauty away because it does not expect a face to overthrow its reason. The fear of the beautiful woman flourishes wherever desire is treated as an external force that acts upon helpless people, rather than something each person is responsible for governing. Seen this way, the intensity of a society's fear of beauty is a measure of its own immaturity, its unwillingness to locate discipline where discipline belongs. The beautiful woman has always been asked to compensate through her diminishment for a self-control that others decline to practice. None of this means beauty is uncomplicated or that the fear it provokes is easy to live with. To be feared is lonely. To be resented for what you did not choose is exhausting. To be reduced, watched, and blamed for the reactions of others is a heavy thing to carry, and no reframing makes it weightless. But there is a difference between carrying that weight while believing you deserve it and carrying it while understanding exactly what it is. The woman who sees the fear clearly, who recognizes that it is about power and control and mortality rather than about any failing of hers, is no longer at its mercy in the same way. She knows the fear is a mirror, and she knows the reflection is not hers to fix. So the question at the center of it all is not really why society fears a beautiful woman. The answer to that is now clear enough. It fears her because she holds a power it cannot earn, ration, control, or take away, a power that breaks its orders and exposes its unfairness and reminds it of its own mortality. The deeper question is what a beautiful woman does with the knowledge that she is feared. She can spend her life apologizing for a power she never asked for, shrinking to soothe an anxiety that was never hers to soothe. Or she can understand the fear for what it is, a tribute disguised as a threat, and refuse to make herself smaller to accommodate it. The beauty was never the problem. The fear was never her fault, and the freedom when it comes begins the moment she stops trying to be forgiven for being what she is.